Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 33. What's hot in the Kindle Store with Alex Newton of K-Lytics.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
Hi Alex, can you tell the listeners a bit about how you got into starting K-Lytics and a brief overview of what K-Lytics is?
Sure. So first of all, hi, and great to be on the show. Well, K-Lytics is a long story. I mean, to start with, what does K-Lytics stand for? Very easy. It's Kindle plus Analytics together gives K-Lytics. The original name was actually Kindlelytics, which would have been much sexier, but
trademark and
my trademark. And actually, I had launched Kindlelytics and started blogging and all that sort of stuff until I'm completely naive, as a internet entrepreneur newcomer. And I get these first feedbacks from Google Plus groups. Hey, it's really a sexy product, but you're going to have a big storm, excuse my words, from Amazon very soon and their lawyers. And I thought, shouldn't I consult a lawyer? And I did. And well, basically, although if you search for URLs, so internet addresses that contain the word Kindle, which would be a violation of Amazon trademark terms, you find probably 100,000 hits. But my lawyer said, well, you could be the 100th and 1,000th and still get a lawsuit. So I decided to call it K-Lytics. That's where we are now.
Okay, so for the listeners who maybe haven't seen K-Lytics, what services do you provide?
So in essence, it is a market research service, or you could call it a data service that helps authors and publishers make better and faster publishing decisions. Now, that sounds very abstract, but if you translate it into plain English, it's basically people ask me, well, if I'm a writer and I want to write something and I have already a genre of choice, what would be the best subgenres to invest in? Or if I'm a publisher and have to make decisions about my author or topical portfolio, what are the hot niches in the ebook market? Or, many people come to me who are beginning self-publishers who have almost a clean sheet of paper and say, just tell me what makes money on Kindle and I'll hire a ghostwriter and try to make money. So what's selling and what has the least competition? That's what it is in essence. And there is a lot around it next to the data, which is training videos, special hot topics, you name it, Facebook advertising, the keyword hijacking topic on Amazon, whatever special things comes along that render themselves to fact-based, numbers-driven analysis. That's what I do for a living.
Okay. So can you explain your methodology for working out which genres in the Kindle Store are hot and which are cold?
Right. So basically, in essence, there's a whole number of things you can look at for any book, right? You can look at its sales rank. You can look at its price level. You can look at the, say, competitive intensity of any genre the book is in. So is that a genre where you have already 10,000 titles as a competitor or only a couple of hundred? You can look at the number of pages you would have to write to at least meet the genre average. And you can do all sorts of things. So if people ask me what is hot, well, let's try with the simple things. Let's start with the number of sales per day. And that's a number you can basically deduct from the Amazon sales rank. And how do you aggregate it to a whole genre level? Well, I number crunch probably now about 2 million book data points on Amazon. And what I found basically was that for most genres and subgenres, the top 100, so the published bestseller list, are representative basically as an indicator for the whole genre. Why? Because by the time you reach title number 20 or title 100, the sales rank has dropped off so much that the sales are like extremely low. And that makes basically the top representative. So I monitor all these 2,800 bestseller lists down to the subcategory level on Kindle. And I complement that data with the other indicators I mentioned, price level, etc. And that way you can basically come to a conclusion which are the genres that offer, say, the highest sales at the best price, at the least competition. And I think one important thing to note, though, is because many people right away say, yeah, but couldn't I do this myself? Or aren't there browser-based tools who also do this? Well, first of all, yes, you can do it yourself, but if you do it for 2,800 subgenres, you probably have to sit for quite a while. And the other thing is, you can use these browser-based plugin tools. There's various, not just for books, there's various Amazon spying tools and whatever they are called. They're great tools for a short-term snapshot. But what I figured looking at these, hundreds of thousands of book data points is that the Amazon sales rank for any book fluctuates plus minus up to 25% within 24 hours and up to 95% in a 30-day period. So if you look at Amazon like right now and you say, oh my God, green smoothies, blah, blah, blah is the great trend. You look at it basically a day later and the book is gone, especially also if you let yourself deceive by free promos. So long story short, basically I aggregate the data from individual books up to categories or subcategories, market niches, whatever you want to call it, and try to do a fact-based measure that irons out the peaks and valleys that you observe over time.
Okay. So I guess you can guess the next question I'm going to ask. What genres are currently hot in the Kindle store?
And my immediate question back would be, well, from which perspective and then what aggregate level? I mean, if we start in at a helicopter level and, to some of the listeners that they may not be aware of it, because we see many, many people, go into self-publishing thinking, hey, I'm going to be a Kindle millionaire, and the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to upload a ghost-written paleo breakfast recipe book, right? Mm-hmm. And I go, that's by the way how I started to, and I can later tell a little bit about that. And you look into this and say, well, have you ever looked at, first of all, starting, well, what is the competition, literature and fiction versus nonfiction, and by now you have about 3.4 million English titles.
Yeah.
On Kindle. So by uploading, and if you just go into the niche like paleo breakfast recipe, you see there's more than 2,500 competing titles. You're never going to earn a single, dollar in royalties doing such thing. So from a very helicopter level, what people have to realize, and even if they don't want to realize, Kindle platform is essentially dominated by three main genres. It's romance, it's mystery, thriller, and suspense, and it's science fiction and fantasy, a bit of teen and young adult, and children's ebooks from a sales perspective. And then you get a long tail of everything, ranging from religion and spirituality down to travel or engineering and transportation. So there is these niche markets and there's the big markets that dominate the platform. And from there, we can obviously in the talk, drill down and say, okay, what is then hot from a pure sales perspective? Or what is hot once I relate the sales versus the competition? So I'll answer the question, but I just have to say, there's lots of angles how to look at it. And I think it's important that also people look at the helicopter perspective. That is, Kindle, in essence, the sales are in fiction, not so much in nonfiction. The competition is, however, much higher in nonfiction than in fiction. And of course, the other side of the coin is it's probably easier to get a short nonfiction book out than it is to write 700-page fantasy novel. That's the other side of the coin, of course.
Yes. I mean, I think there's still a lingering get-rich-quick on Kindle mentality out there. But you sent me a sample report that you'd done for the fantasy genre. And it was quite interesting to see that there are still differences in terms of, there are some subgenres within, say, fantasy and science fiction, which do relatively sell more copies for the amount of competition they have, as opposed to others. So, if somebody was to come to you and said, well, I'm going to write a book about something on the Kindle store.
Right.
And what would be the, let's say somebody comes up to you and says, I'm going to write a book about X.
Yeah.
What would be the subject you'd be most confident that they'd be successful in from a statistical point of view right at the moment? And what would be the one that you would you'd be kind of thinking to yourself, they're never going to sell anything?
Never going to sell anything. Well, let's start with a letter, and that's a real story. So, for example, I had an elderly couple and they wanted to heard about, hey, you can earn a bit of extra money in your retirement, writing books.
Yeah.
And okay, I asked him, well, what are you passionate about? Because I think that's also an important factor. Some people write for the money. Some people write for the passion. And I think the sweet spot is if you write for both the passion and the money, with the intention to find some readers, or demand, if you call it in economic terms. Now, this couple said, well, we have this great passion about horticulture and gardening in essence. So couldn't we do something there? And I say, well, let's have a look. So if you in the in my database, if I actually do it here online again, so we have the latest data, right? So if you go to gardening, I mean, on the very subject, there are 24 sub niches, ranging from bonsai, Japanese gardens, herbs, ornamental plants, lawns, garden furnishings, whatever you name it. And, I just plugged it in here basically as we speak. And if I sort all those 24 subgenres here by now looking at the sales, what is the highest selling genre in gardening? Well, then there's the umbrella category, gardening and horticulture, where across the top 20 titles, the average sales rank is around 24,000, which means about 4 sold copies per book per day. And I immediately told the couple, and by the way, once you go here to the level gardening, horticulture, vegetables, it's in the top 21 sold book per title per day. So I immediately told the couple, don't even bother. If you want to earn money with it, it's an absolute no-go. Now, what I tell them also is the idea per se may be great. Why don't you do a video course product on, how to grow the best tomatoes in the world and sell it on ClickBank or whatever then the right channel is. But in that case, Kindle is not the right channel for such type of topic, just as a completely arbitrary example.
I know. Well, it's funny you should mention about horticulture, because on a previous show I had a slight rant about a Sunday Times article, I think it was. She's a British newspaper, and they were describing about how they managed to fake a Kindle #1, and it was in like one of these subcategories in garden and horticulture on the British Amazon site. And I was like,
Right.
well, you look at it doesn't take a genius to look at the sales figures. Even within that, they must be I think you sell one book and you get into the chart.
Yeah, well, special bonus for the listeners here. So if you want to impress your friend and have a legitimate #1 bestseller on Amazon, just write 15 pages on gardening, or, put something together and upload it on Kindle and put it in the category crafts, hobbies and home, gardening and horticulture, bonsai.
Yes, well, that's what they did. I think it was a bonsai book they did. And
It was a bonsai book?
And it was on the UK Amazon store as well. So it's
that's so funny, because there's only 6 books in the category. So first of all, by the very definition of uploading the book, even if you haven't had any sale yet, you can call yourself legitimately an Amazon bestseller, because you made it into the top 100 bestseller list of the bonsai category.
Yeah, well, you're top 10, aren't you? So,
and exactly. And by the way, just for the fun of it, because I once made a blog post, it was called "Do You Sell Bestsellers That Do Not Sell?" Mm-hmm. And I did an analysis back at the time, looking over time at the worst selling Amazon sub categories. And I think the one that really stood out, and no offense taken, whoever is out there in North America being a big rodeo fan, but I think the worst you could possibly get in was sports and outdoors rodeo, which is a sort of but by the way, even that category by now, you find more male 6-pack ab romantic or gay whatever novel in that very category, where people romance authors try to trick the system and put their gay cowboy romance into that category to get ranked.
It's a difficult one, because I've advised people before that it's not a bad idea to have, because you have multiple categories for your book in Amazon, you're allowed. So, but I think there is a lot of there are a lot of people who are just abusing it and putting their book in these really easy categories. I mean, I'm not going to put my fantasy book in gardening and horticulture just to make it a
Although
top 10 seller.
You can rethink the plot a bit now that you know the data.
Yes, my gardening mystery lesbian romance or whatever it is, to try and cover all the bases.
Yes.
So on the other extreme, if it was like, I think you call them like hot niches, like these, they're not so competitive and they're not sort of super selling, but they sell reasonably well. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to be the situation that somebody's going to say, I can write a book about anything. But
right.
What would be the other extreme to that kind of garden and horticulture, bonsai tree side of things?
Absolutely. So the other side of the extremes, you mentioned a term here, hot niche. I basically came up with two classifications. One is I call hot sell, just for the very reason something which is even smaller as a niche. I call that a hot sell, and the other one would be a hot niche. And then if you get bigger, I call it the hot mainstream. Hot niche would be, hot sells would be book categories where the competition is less than 2,000 competitive titles.
Yeah.
But where the sales are actually pretty high up there if you look at the bestseller list. And if you just looked at that level, and by the way, then hot niches, it's no big mystery, would then be categories where the competition is between 2,000 and 10,000 titles. And when you then get bigger, I call it either hot mainstream or beaten track mainstream, depending on the level of sales. But you ask about, what would be currently the big hot sales. So these are the categories where you have, competition less than 2,000 titles. I mean, basically what's doing extremely well is currently up there crime fiction, mystery and crime fiction. There's some very specific subgenres here, vigilant justice, for example. What's doing extremely well is literary fiction, women's fiction, and within those subcategories around psychological or fantasy related things, crime fiction on kidnapping is doing great. And then it gets very specific, where whatever mystery, thriller, suspense within that occult related book. So it's a pretty diverse field, but looking at the data, and you also ask what's going to be big in 2016. What's also, if I look at the overall genre data, what I've seen in the, say, later half of 2015 is really a bit of a renaissance of the mystery, thriller, suspense genre. My personal prediction would have been science fiction, also following whatever The Martian and other recent movies. But the uptake there was, it's still a super great genre, science fiction, to be in. But what's interesting is the uptake there of the book genre was much less following those movies than it was, for example, compared to romance last year, when we had the 50 Shades of Grey movie hitting the theaters. The whole genre was like completely lifted upwards, and you got these flood of billionaire related romance novels on Kindle. That uplift did not take place, surprisingly, in science fiction. And this year there's a whole number of really interesting sub-niches in the mystery, thriller, suspense genre, very high up there. And still with competition, I'm just looking here at the table in front of me. One genre here, about 1,000 titles, 970, 738, 7. So these are genres where if you really target it, and we can talk a little later beyond the data, what to write there, that's, I think, is still very interesting terrain for the typical self-published author.
Okay. Are your figures just for the US Amazon store, or are they for the other markets as well?
No, at this point in time, I only look at Amazon.com, and they're only on the English language title. So basically, it's the US market. I am planning to do also looking at various other foreign markets this year, probably more as one-off reports, such as the UK, Germany, France. China could be a very interesting one to do, by the way, as well. But the clients I have are from all over the world, and they also look at Amazon.com a bit as a lead market in terms of trends. Whether it is then totally representative of what gets read in India, I have my doubts, but for the Anglo-Saxon world, I think, since also many, obviously, UK or Australian people look at Amazon.com, I think it's probably indicative of the major trends in the English language literature.
Yeah, I mean, I think apart from possibly the sort of agency pricing of some of the big publishers. I think it's more or less identical to the other big markets, and India and China are going to be different anyway. So I don't know how much useful data you get out of them in terms of the Amazon store. They use other stores and things as well. So, okay, what options do authors have if they want to find out more information about K-Lytics in terms of reports and plans?
Well, yeah, very easy. So first of all, the website is K-Lytics, like in analytics.com. Yeah. That's the main home and sales page. But if you want to, first of all, check us out, and there's tons of free content on the blog. So just add /blog. You find monthly trend videos and special analysis. We just have actually right now there is a free training on Facebook ad targeting, where there have been new features been rolled out to the general public, which actually, if you look at the numbers, may make Facebook advertising, it's still a dicey subject, but make it much more viable for lower priced items such as books. So lots of free stuff on k-lytics.com/blog. Then if you want to get your feet wet, like you did, Tim, there's on the sidebar you find, and there's a shop with various single genre reports. So if you're interested in, say, science fiction or mystery thriller, this week we're going to update the whole romance report, covering probably more than 70 submarkets in it. That's where you can get started. And then from there, what we do for both self-publishers, publishing companies, and authors who really treat their business like a business, we have subscription plans, and the highest membership tier is what we call K-Lytics Elite. And there you basically get monthly access to the table I just have in front of me, which covers about 2,800 sub-markets on the Kindle platform.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, the reports I got were very interesting in terms of the science fiction and fantasy, and they can buy the reports individually, can't they? You don't have to buy a monthly plan.
Exactly. So the single genre reports, which cover the big genres, I mean, the data is usually I update it every half a year or quarterly, which is for the big main genres like romance, science fiction, mystery, thriller, suspense. Recently the self-help one, self-help motivational for people who are in nonfiction. So these can be bought individually in the shop that you'll find on the website.
Okay. I had a list of questions which I've written down, and we've already covered most of them already.
There's so much more to talk about, so no worries.
No. So you were saying earlier that non-fiction was a lot more competitive than fiction. Is that generally true? I mean, can somebody make money out of non-fiction, or would you say fiction if they've got obviously it's very much people have one persuasion for one fiction or non-fiction, but would you say that actually if somebody was thinking between fiction and non-fiction, actually fiction would be better?
Yeah, it's obviously the $100,000 question, because whenever I say fiction, people immediately say, well, but, if I want to have a ghost-written nonfiction book, that's something I can easily come up with an outline just by looking at the competitor book and then give it to a ghostwriter, and then hopefully, by the way, quality assured, because obviously we see a lot of, still junk book uploads there. Although just, I think a week ago, as a little detour there, I saw some Amazon article which said that now you get alerts if an Amazon robot finds too many spelling mistakes in your book. They now at least block it as a little bit of quality assurance. But still, you have, just in terms of degree of competition, I think there's by now almost close to 1.5 million nonfiction titles on the platform, which are classified in that umbrella category, and not all of them get classified in it. So the competition, I think, is about 1.6 to 2 times as high. And the counter argument I always get is, as I just say, well, but the number of pages is so much lower. And then I go, well, true, but in fiction, you have a lot of authors that, by the way, still, despite the new Kindle 2.0 royalty system, still earn a lot of money by, churning out their monthly romance short read. Yeah. And they produce it like a conveyor belt.
Yeah, well, I've written novellas, about 20,000 words, and they do sell on the Amazon store. I personally don't like the royalty structure in that you don't get the 70% royalty unless your book is priced $2.99 or over in the Amazon store. And I think that's stopping a lot of short fiction from being released, which is a shame. But I think there's a demand for shorter fiction as well. It's just that the royalty structure is skewing the market a bit.
Yeah. Although that's very interesting. For example, we did a special analysis about 3 months after. Well, first of all, when the new royalty scheme was released, I basically did some scenario calculations that say, well, with some assumptions on what percentage of the book gets actually read by the consumer who borrows a book. And by the way, that's what many people got wrong right in the beginning when the new royalty scheme came out there. There was this huge outcry by many authors and say, well, wait a minute. The new royalty scheme only affected borrows. It didn't affect sale, right? That's the first, lesson number 1, read the small print. Lesson number 2 was there was this huge outcry. And the fact of the matter was, rough calculation. First of all, if your books on average had more than, I calculated 45,000, 50,000 words, you're on the safe side. You're actually going to be better off. Only if the book has less than, say, 45,000 words, you're in the red zone where, other things being equal, you're worse off. And obviously a lot of authors in, say, for example, the children book genre, they got really severely hit by this, or people who only turned out those 15-page or 99-page junk novels. And perhaps rightfully so, although I don't want to make a judgment there. Not the kids book authors, of course, but the people who just tried to trick the system. But once that was done, then 3 months. So at that point in time, first of all, people believed now the book page length is going to get bigger, longer again, and they believed that a lot of people are going to take their books off Kindle Unlimited. Well, I looked at the market, and I'm going to redo the analysis now that we have about more than 6 months of history. But 3 to 4 months into the new royalty scheme, we looked at the market. What is the percentage of books that qualify as Kindle Unlimited, right?
Yeah.
You know what the change was from before and after the new royalty scheme? And after that 90-day cancellation period? 0.02%. So
made no difference at all, didn't it?
So 0. There was this huge outcry, and however, what people don't realize, yes, there may be that big outcry, but the fact of the matter was there was no super duper big structural shift in the Kindle market because they changed the royalty scheme. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't put my books in Kindle. I had a go been trying putting in Kindle Unlimited, but I prefer to sort of release the books on the other platforms instead, like Kobo and the like. I think the choice of whether people go into KDP Select scheme almost doesn't come down to the royalties. It's whether they want to focus on the Amazon stores or whether they want to go wide, as much as anything to do with how much the royalties are.
Many people don't even really think about it, they just upload their book, click on that little icon. But some people who do it very consciously. First of all, the fact of the matter is, and we did a recent blog post article on this because in the mainstream media in last autumn, it was spearheaded by an article in the New York Times that suddenly argued, ebooks are dead and this big renaissance of print and ebooks are struggling. And the whole information was a complete misinformation campaign by the big publishers who, half a year before that had negotiated terms with Amazon that let them set their own ebook prices again. And they put up the ebook prices for their titles, which obviously many of which are sold via Amazon. And no wonder demand goes down. The New York Times quoted the numbers by the Association of American Publishers, which, quote unquote, covers about 2,000 or 2,000 American publishers, all publishers who are not Amazon. Well, but unfortunately, first of all, they increased the ebook prices to protect against cannibalization of their own titles in print. So no wonder demand goes down. And the other thing that the New York Times didn't figure out is that Amazon currently still has a share of 60 to 65% of the US ebook market.
Yeah.
So if I'm a new author and I want to go and publish a book, I ask myself, well, do I want to opt out of 60% of the US, the biggest ebook market in the world? And I'd say, well, why not try, at least for 90 days, the Kindle Select? And then, by the way, using the free promos, we all know free promos have no longer the effect than they used to have.
Yeah.
However, if you then combine that with potential investments in other paid book marketing schemes, and you coordinate them all to do the promotion of your book at that very time interval so if you line it all up to the same point in time, that you get really like a thunderclap in social media effect. That's where people still earn a lot of money on the tail end of that coordinated free promotion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily as straightforward as it used to be, but I do think you're right. And certainly if you have a concerted sort of sales boost over because they say that actually Amazon doesn't really like just one day. If it's just one massive day of sales, that won't give you as much of a boost as having like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then you start appearing in charts and things, and you'll get sales, and also bought sales on Amazon as well. So, I mean, this is why I think people need to be careful about how they pick the categories for their book, because as long as they're relevant, if you've got a relatively sort of like a hot sell one category, and then if you can get into the charts on that, then that can possibly push you up. If your book's also in one of these like hot niche categories as well. I don't know. I mean, a lot's going to depend on what is actually selling at the time. It may not make sense to have like a gay lesbian bonsai tree, romance or whatever. Yeah. But I think if people make use of statistics, it's probably easier to buy one of your reports rather than trawling through the Amazon store looking at all the best-selling categories at the time.
You will save a lot of time, but also the other thing, as I said, the Amazon market, whilst on the high level, is, well, I wouldn't say static, but there is a lot of inertia, and there's no like big shift, as we just explained on the short reads, for example, but on the micro level, individual books, I mean, as said, you have so much fluctuation. So by going onto a bestseller list like right now, and from that one look judging this is hot, you can be totally led astray. Yeah. In fact, you can. It's risky.
It's like, I remember last year, I think it was, somebody was saying that like sea adventure or something like that as a subcategory of, I don't know, fantasy or something like that was very hot. But I'm sure now there's a whole load of other people who started to write like pirate books and things. Right. And it's probably moved out of that niche category just because it had so much publicity as being like a hot category.
That's right. And that's, by the way, a very interesting value to look at. And I started monitoring now. There's a bit over time. I mean, for those of you who are more into numbers or mathematically versed, although it's very easy, just divide the number of sales by the degree of competition. Yeah. In essence, what I call the sales to competition ratio. And it's very interesting for individual categories to monitor that over time to see, are there still categories where that ratio goes up or where it goes down? Where it goes down, it means either the sales go down or the supply of books, so people entering the market outgrow the demand of books, versus where this ratio goes up, it's either the sales go up or at least the degree of competition remains stagnant. And that's the interesting niches or sub niches to look at, where you, at least over a certain period of time, you have this high level of sales, but not already the big influx of new authors like you. Yeah, I mean, you just named pirates, the same held true for whatever paranormal romance involving vampires and alpha males. By the way, still great genres to be in, surprisingly. It's also an interesting reflection of our society if you look at what's really selling on Amazon these days.
Okay. I think I more or less covered all the questions I was going to ask you. It was very nice to have you on the show. How can people find out and get in contact with you and find out more about K-Lytics? So,
as said earlier, go to ak-lytics.com or .com/blog, K-Lytics.com/blog. Or if you want to get in touch with me personally, just write a mail to support@ K-Lytics.com. And I'm perfectly willing to, just in the subject line, do podcast or, to Alex, and I will personally take care of your questions.
Okay. It was very nice to speak to you today, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. And have a great week too.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.